All right. Thank you, Paul. So it's going to have a couple minutes while we get the chair set up. I did want to take a quick poll. After seeing all this great information about the things you can do on the mobile web, I wanted to see how many people are actually going to give a try to build out a progressive mobile web app going forward based on what you just saw. All right. Very, very glad to hear it. We're certainly very excited about all the things that are now possible and the improvements that have been made to start to make the mobile web much closer to what the app experience is. All right, let's bring the panel members out. So I hope you guys have been enjoying the content this evening. I know we had So we're really, really happy to bring together a set of folks who have experience both in building apps and investing in the ecosystem here, as well as building products for consumers across India. So very quickly, we have Anand, who's the Chief Product Officer from Snapdeal. Nishant here, who's he's the CEO and co-founder of Culture Alley, who makes Hello English. We have Sudhir, who is the general manager or managing director of IDG Ventures. And we have Jay Koda, who's from Google, managing the engineering in the Hyderabad office. So as a first question, I was going to ask an easy one to get started. So what is some advice you would give someone who's just getting started in this market? Like if they're early stage, like what are the things from what you've learned that you think would be the most useful bit of advice to get them going?
Right. So from my perspective, I think, and it got talked about earlier as well, I think what's most critical is to stay focused on a particular pain point, right? And keep talking to this customer again and again while you're iterating, right? So in my sense, it's just about designing it correctly for this one target customer that you have, understanding his pain point and talking to him again and again, and really designing it to solve that problem. Oftentimes, as engineers, we start out from what we can do versus what is it that's really needed to solve that pain point. And I think that's where we need to continually focus.
So here, how about for companies you invest in?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is what succeeds at the seed and early stage is solve a problem. I think there's a very fundamental issue. You're not building the best technology or the best product, the best service. You're solving a real problem. And that obviously has corollaries of better technology and better product. I think the second issue is execute to perfection. And I will just leave it at that, because there is nothing like capital efficient execution. There's nothing like timely execution. There's nothing like execution. And those firms which have done this right from the beginning develop a DNA which is unsurpassable by anybody else.
Yeah, makes sense.
So first of all, if you're actually working on startups and ideation, probably, congratulations, this is the right time in India to actually try out your idea, certainly. One of the things that we have noticed over a period of time is that India is a very diverse market, right? So start making some early insights, building early insights around what you're trying to solve, and be ready to be proven wrong, right? So this is a lot of times, you don't actually get the market, may not get the market exactly at the first time. Needs a lot of iteration. So that's one thing, like be open, be ready to be proven wrong. Build feedback loops, right? Whether it's the user testing, A/B testing, data analysis. It's really important to learn and tune and pivot your strategy. A few other things are, we heard in the past the sessions around, fit for India, right? So these are important. Most of the issues are really relevant to the end users. I think those are some of the things that you really have to worry about.
So actually, one of the points you raised, I know is I believe really relevant for a couple of you, around with the diversity of India. Like I've only been here a few days, but just seeing the wide range of experiences and language and sort of the urban rural split, like how, when you're building out a product that's supposed to go across all of India, like how do you balance these things? Like, do you...
I had a nice story planned for the last question.
Well, feel free.
No, this is actually very fresh for us. I think, one of the things that struck me when I started building products in India was that it's really like building for 22 different countries. And I think to try to build for, one persona can be very frustrating. And I would say more than anything, just embrace the fact that there is 22 different personas, which means that, if you succeed with, let's say, 5 or 6 or 7 of them, you probably are going to have quite a sizable user base. And so it's actually an opportunity. And so, I think there are so many examples of, there is an entire company that I met when I was at Airtel, which had built a $100 million business and didn't have a single smartphone user, right? There's a startup called ViewClip, whose entire user base was only on 2G phones. And actually, they were wondering how they were going to go after smartphone users because they didn't have at that time, they didn't have a single smartphone user. And it actually blew my mind that you could build a $100 million video business in India with very little smartphone user base. Yeah. And so I think it's actually more of an opportunity than you might think. The other thing I would say is, in a way, tying it to the last question is, I think it's very important to come in every so often and take a fresh look at your own business. I think things are changing incredibly fast in India. And I think just because you assumed something 3 months ago, it may not be valid today. And so I would almost go to the extent of saying, assume that you got fired and new people came into the business and they had no baggage and they were just looking at everything afresh. What decisions would they make about the business today? And sometimes that cycle might be even once every 3 months because there are just so many smartphone users. The number one smartphone vendor seems to be evolving every 3 months in India as well. So I think it's actually more of an opportunity than probably any other part of the world.
Are the things that with you trying to go to after non-English speakers that you had to go
Absolutely. So we are Culture Rally, and just to give you a context, so I'm actually that one, just sitting
yes,
on.
we have.
But we're actually behind this app called the Hello English app, which is actually helping about 85 lakh learners speak basic conversational English every day. Right? So we are currently the #1 educational app in India. But what that does is it takes 15 different vernacular language speakers and helps them learn basic English that they can use, if they are a driver or if they are a delivery boy or something, and it allows them to use it offline on their smartphones, right? So now the question that you mentioned about just how do you deal with, the diversity in terms of cultures is very interesting for us because we don't see this as one behemoth, when we are dealing with this customer base. We actually cut each of these linguistic communities differently, and we actually design for each of them independently. Because what happens is, when somebody is starting to think in Tamil, and he's trying to converse in English, it's completely different from somebody who's starting out from Hindi or Urdu or Bengali for that matter, right? So we treat each of these linguistic communities pretty much independent, and then all the content that we design for them are really keeping these subtleties in mind. That's one. The other thing is that reaching to such a large user base in India required us to really rethink the tech behind the app, right? And as the session before it really pointed out, we've designed the app such that it works offline in most scenarios, right? So what we see is people will download our app and take them to their villages, and distribute them to their near and dear ones. And the way it's been designed is that it'll continue to work offline perfectly well for most cases. Only if you have to update your content, you need to come online to do it. And that sort of helped us a lot in gaining the sort of traction and reaching out to the masses.
Yeah. Well, how about one of the unique things about this kind of user base where you have so many people coming online for the first time is that they don't necessarily have an expectation for how things should work. And you really have the opportunity, you have both the challenge and the opportunity of they don't necessarily have the experience of, that you can just guide them how you've guided other users, but you also have somewhat of a clean slate. You get to come up with new things. How do you guys deal with both of those?
So I'll take a crack at that. just speaking from our perspective, we started in e-commerce about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. And there have been established players who've had probably 10,000 people, 500 million in funding, and yet we're roughly neck and neck in e-commerce today, right? And we actually had an internal conversation about that, and we were saying actually we should be really paranoid. We should be really worried about that, because if someone like us could start a business in that same space and just use really good execution to get neck and neck with someone who's been around for 5 more years, well, then maybe there's someone there today who could do that tomorrow. I think from the perspective of the question you're asking is, there are so many people coming online with just no baggage, and the smartphone is pretty much the only device they've seen. And so the fact that you might have had a great PC experience means nothing to them. They're just consuming from their phone. The fact that you had a great iOS app might mean nothing to them. And so I think that context is extremely important. And as previous speakers were saying, a lot of them could only consume you from mobile web, and they might not even know that you have an app or that you have a desktop experience. So I think it's extremely important to have a great experience across all form factors, because you never know what that journey is going to look like. And also, I feel like one of the things that's been shocking for me is that you might think that someone coming online for the first time might have very modest aspirations for what they want to do online. In fact, the opposite is true, right? They want everything. And they want everything with the same intensity that like any of us would want it. And so the adoption that we see, like sometimes you think maybe they need a crash course in how to do e-commerce. And actually they don't. They understand what cash on delivery is. They understand what delivery promises. So very complex e-commerce concepts that we try to explain internally are very obvious to people coming online for the first time. So actually the learning curve is incredibly fast. And so in a very timely sense, we launched our service in 12 languages yesterday. And we feel like the people who will consume it are not the same people who consumed us in English. And so to Nishant's point, I think the context is very different for someone who's only going to use us in Gujarati. They don't care that we have a great English experience. So I think that's a bit of a scary thing, actually. The fact that someone could start today and have a great language experience and could become as big as someone who's been around for 8 years or 9 years or 10 years.
You're starting over again and again in each of these different languages.
Yeah. Just add to that, I think the onboarding experience of a new consumer, technology baseline today is such, whether it's a 4-year-old child or an 80-year-old adult. I think I haven't seen much of a time difference except for just because of the age. And I'll give you an example, which is, last week we had to go to Ajanta Ellora to see the caves. And my driver had actually never used Google Maps earlier. So I just told him, how come you're not using Google Maps? He took 2 trips within the city of Bangalore from maybe 8 to 10 kilometers to onboard himself onto Google Maps. He downloaded himself, by the way, because he knows how to download, Ghana. And to that extent, for him, Google Map download was no difference. And we drove down from Bangalore to Aurangabad using Google Maps. So the onboarding process, because of baseline technology, is very simple. So I don't think that's a big issue in today's market, whether it is product discovery, e-commerce, service discovery. I don't think it's a big issue.
I'm not sure if my mic, okay. I would like to borrow one of the quotes from Nandan Nilekani. He keeps talking about how do you take advantage of no legacy when it comes to India, right? I really feel like, starting from a clean slate, really empowers in some use cases. There's a chance to leapfrog, like what you see happening probably in the payments right now. Like India may be leapfrogging credit cards altogether, right? Maybe directly going to phone as a wallet, mobile payments. So there are some interesting experiences that you can think without worrying about legacy. So that's one point to really take advantage of. From user experience point of view, I see a lot of Indian apps trying different gamifications. Normally, kind of violating, let's say, established standards of apps in the Western world, but very successful in India, right? So it kind of gives us a chance to challenge and start fresh and start from first principles, do things right. So
I guess, what are kinds of technology do you feel that is really missing? Like one of the things that seemed clear from what others were saying is with all of these different scripts and things like that, that it sounds like a lot of folks are doing, having to come up with their own solutions. Like what do you see as the pieces that are missing that hold folks back from making great experiences?
Yeah, so I think in our case, one of the things that poses challenge is just the access bit, right? So one is obviously the availability of infrastructure. And secondly is just, how much or how affordable is that infrastructure to these users, right? And we really need to keep these constraints in mind when you have to design a product which can scale massively, right? So in our case, what's interesting is that every fourth user who downloads our app actually downloads it from a non-Play Store source, which means that he's getting it from a Bluetooth device, from a Bluetooth channel, from somebody who's sitting next to him in his, in his office or a friend, etc., but not wanting to spend that 10 MB or 11 MB downloading it from the Play Store, right? So these are sort of nuances that you need to sort of understand when you're getting into the shoes of the customer. And really, when you have to design an experience, you have to design it under these limitations so that it can benefit the largest number of people, right? So in our case, it's this access and the infrastructure which we keep in mind. And obviously, if this were not, or if this was taken care of, we would have designed a completely different experience. It would be really a complete voice recognition, image recognition sort of an experience. But now, given these constraints, we have to design for whatever can serve the most.
This is an interesting question. 300-odd million internet users, sometime in the future, hopefully 1 billion. How do these 1 billion people onboard themselves for product discovery and service discovery? I think our viewpoint is that interim solutions, and this is an investor viewpoint, interim solutions are possibly going to be keyboard-oriented. Whether it is a English to Hindi transliteration or a keyboard, I think the natural phenomena of voice-enabled transactions is going to take over, and that's the only way, to my mind, a large volume of people will enable onboarding. To give you an example, if somebody in Tamil Nadu wants to book a ticket, they can go to Yatra and try to key in all the stuff. If he doesn't know English, and if Tamil is not so efficient, he actually can't book that ticket. But if he just says, in Tamil, I want to book a ticket from Delhi to or Chennai to Bangalore, then is that transaction possible to be completed? So I think I agree with what you said in terms of India skipping. India is a country which skips many things, right? It skipped the phone, it skipped many other things, it's going to skip the credit card. I think India is going to skip the whole keyboard orientation of onboarding of a consumer and literally look at voice down the line. Let's see what happens.
I'm probably going to be echoing some of the feedback I've been getting from the developers. One of the first things to really, proliferate NBU apps, or India-based apps, I keep hearing is, mostly input-output methods, right? Vernacular speech recognition is the technology I would totally want. Maybe, handwriting recognition as well. I feel like if we can actually support technology pieces that helps apps deal with slow connections and shaky connections in the network libraries, that could be really interesting, infrastructure to be used within the apps. In a way, Firebase, offline is a great, tool to really use, and maybe we should do more of that. That's pretty much it.
I think just building on the conversation so far, I would say there's probably a ton of opportunity on the user experience itself. which is just such a fundamental part of what people are consuming. Whether you take into account what kind of network connectivity the person is on, what kind of past experience the person has had, what the device is capable of, what people like this person have done in the past. Just there's so much context around a mobile experience. And I feel like even today, mobile experiences are really built as if they're desktop experiences with only the IP address available. You know what the weather is like outside, you know where the user is, it's raining around the user or not. You can probably detect, if the user is listening to music while they're shopping or not. So I think all that context has really not been taken into account into the experience. And my sense is also what shows up in the experience could evolve a lot based on context. And I feel like today, at best, we probably remember, the last item that was not purchased in the shopping cart. And I think it feels to me like it's still, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's, what worked for American e-commerce that's been imported into India. I think, over the next few years, I think e-commerce will be built for the next 100 million people who come online. And as a result of it, there'll be an incredible amount of disruption that happens, both for existing types of companies that get built, as well as existing modes of consumption, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of what we've discussed here will sort of go in as input material. Like for instance, if you take slow connections as an example, one could say, look, that's a temporary problem, it's going to go away. The fact is that no telco in India has more than 5 megahertz of contiguous spectrum anywhere in India. So it literally is the laws of physics, right? They're never going to have more than that amount of bandwidth reliably available. And so slow connections are a reality in India. But if I'm connected to Wi-Fi at home backed by a 4G connection, the fact that I'm otherwise on a slow connection doesn't matter now. And so the experiences have to be very different when I'm on those two different contexts. So I think that'll evolve considerably.
So do you all feel that some of these solutions that might be coming out of, that might be really evolved here in India as sort of unique experiences, like that you might actually be able to be successful in bringing them outside of India to other parts of the world? And if so, sort of, what do you think those opportunities are? Start?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. So, absolutely. I think based on some of the companies which we have seen, India has given tremendous scale in a very short period of time. And I'll give you maybe one or two examples. We have a company called Aegis in information security, and within the first 3 or 4 years of their existence, they enabled information security for the Aadhaar program. So in the 4th year of their existence, they had 350 million people in India where information security was enabled. Now, for a company to achieve 350 million people was unheard of anywhere in the world. That enabled them to go into North America, UK, and get large clients because the platform capability on scale was not questioned. Okay? So that's another example. We have another company called NewGen into digital transformation. One of their first customers was LIC in India. Then, LIC has over 100 million insurance consumers, right? So their digital transformation platform worked with 100 million consumers. For them to go outside, they were not questioned on the scalability of technology. So that's an example of how not just the technology being innovative, but the scale of global corporations or consumers from India works.
Even actually, to your point, Sudhir, even in our case, what we did was we actually just looked at India and tried to design a product for the typical Indian consumer. But then what we realized was that very similar market conditions exist as we look outside of India as well, right? So what we did was we tried using the same technology and adapted the content for Pakistan, for example, and it worked. We did the same thing for Bangladesh, Nepal, the Middle East, and I'm proud to say that 7 of all these markets, we are the #1 educational app. And because what we did was we really learned from what India was telling us. We really learned what technology was finding most use, what use cases, what content was finding most relevance, and then we adapted them to these markets to sort of fit their needs. And yes, in that context, India did help us leapfrog, a lot of the local incumbents who were there in those markets.
One last question, which is just looking at all of the sort of opportunities for technology to help people in a country like India. Like what do you think? How do you think of sort of social entrepreneurship for good? Like, what do you think of the opportunities for technology and technology companies to make the Indian people's lives better?
I think probably the two biggest opportunities are education and healthcare. That could use the most disruption through technology. And I'll even give you, it'll actually be in very unlikely ways, right? So I'll give you a very simple example. In a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 cities, one of the most popular products that sell on Snapdeal is actually glucose monitors and, just blood testing equipment. And today, the way it happens is someone takes, a bunch of suitcases and goes over to a big city because they have to go to a proper medical health equipment store and buy these testing equipment because most of them don't work well or they're not accurate, et cetera. And literally, it has the ability to save lives. And the fact that it could be delivered in 5,000 cities in a day or two, I think it's a very small example of how technology plus access plus level playing field kind of really changes the game for what's possible from a healthcare perspective. I think the same for education. I think we have a great example right here. I think a lot of people sometimes don't go to school because the walk every day to school is just so far. And the opportunity for access plus technology to bring education to where they are and allow them to get educated at their own pace and their own appetite. I think probably two of the most interesting areas.
I want to mention one area which is, to me, a bridge between social, and I'll bracket that with financial inclusion, and pure commerce. Okay? India, the legal India, if I may add, is a cashless society. Okay? If you look at e-commerce, about half of e-commerce at least is cash on delivery today in the country, maybe a little bit lower, okay, depending on the company. But we are talking about something like 7 to 8 billion in a year. About 45% of railway tickets in the country are bought by cash, which is about 40 billion. About 80% of petrol and diesel consumer is bought by cash. I don't have the number in my head for that. And about 80% of LPG by consumers are bought by cash. If I just add up these numbers, they add up to a humongous close to 80 odd billion today. This, and if you add up the SME sector and the Kiryana shops, and India is transacting commerce even by the government in cash. Now, which also means that many of these consumers and businesses are not in the financial inclusion definition in some sense. I think there's a huge opportunity for cash full transaction in electronic form to happen amongst all these. And there is a very strong social element, but there's an extremely strong commerce element here. That, to me, is going to be a game changer as far as technology is concerned, as far as India is concerned in the next 10 to 15 years.
All right, well, we've actually used up all of our time, and I entirely appreciate that we are sitting between you and dinner. So I want to thank all of our panelists for their great insights. And generally, I hope you all appreciated all of the presentations today. We're really glad that you could come out. We at Google are very committed to making developers successful. And if you ever feel that there are things that we could be doing better, please reach out. We'd love to hear feedback. Thank you.